Today we are going to discuss about few other functions, numerical functions and string function related topics, and how to use these functions in calculation fields. So we are going to discuss that. So we have discussed about floor, ceiling functions in previous topics. So where floor will take the lowest integer. So whenever we are doing rounding off, so every time it will take lowest integer, even if the value is, let's say, 23.4 or 23.9. So in both the cases, it will be taking the value as 23 only. And in case of ceiling, it will take the highest integer. So let's take the same example, 23.4, 23.9 is equals to 24. So every time it will be same. So this ceiling function will take highest integer and floor function will take lowest integer. And there is also one more function which will be round off function. So this is mathematical. According to mathematical, whatever is the number that will show. So let's say if you take 23.4, the value will be, if you do the round off, mathematically it is 23. And if you take 23.9, mathematically it will be 24. So that is the use of round off. So let's now discuss about round off function in Tableau. So I'm connecting to sample superstore. So let's take sales and make it discrete. So you can see these many decimals are there. So instead of these decimals, I want to see, or let me put one more condition, one more country column. So as we discussed yesterday, so any measure can be converted into continuous or discrete. So if you convert into discrete, you can see the specific test values. Okay, so now I'll take a round function, round off, for which measure you want to do. You can specify that measure and how many numbers, how many decimals that you want. So you can specify that. So here, so Tableau will also show, if you type in that function name, so it will show you what is the definition of that particular function. And with an example, they are going to show you with an example as well. So if you want to round it off to one decimal, you can specify that, or you don't want to keep any decimal places, so you can keep 0. So basically it does a mathematical round. So rounds a number to the nearest integer or to a specified number of decimal places. To the nearest integer it will do. So as we discussed here, so for 23.4, so 23 is nearest, so it will do rounding off to 23. And for 23.9, 24 is the nearest one, so it is rounding off to 24. So that kind of mathematical round it can do. So here I'm specifying, so 0 decimal. So it will show me, so it will not show me any decimal places. Say okay. Double click on this. So you can't see any decimal places here. And if you specify one decimal, say apply. And yeah, so here you can see, even after one decimal, you don't see any numbers. Actually, there are numbers after decimals. So it is not considering the extra numbers. Even if you show the decimal places, it will not show. It will just be showing the zeros. So if you want 2 decimals, so you can specify 2 decimals and say apply, and it will show you the values till 2 decimals. After 2 decimals, it will show zeros. So that is how you can round off till whatever number of decimals you want, or if you want to round off according to the number itself. So you can make it as whole. If you make it as 0, say apply. So after decimal place, there will be no numbers if you make it 0. So that is the use of round off function. And now we'll discuss about sine function. So sine function is to identify the sign in the measures. So now let's see how Tableau identifies sine. So let me take an example of subcategory. And profit is the only measure which has negative values. So I'm taking profit and I will sort it. So here I have some negative values. And now I will write a calculation to identify which all subcategories has negative values in it. So I'll write a calculation sine of sum of profit. So this will identify if there are any negative values in profit. If there are any negative values in profit, it will show as -1. If there are positive values, it will show 1. That is nothing but +1. So plus will not be shown, only negative sign will be shown. And if there are zeros, the data, it will show 0. So if you write this function, it will have -1, 0, 1. So only these values will be there. So if it is negative, it will be shown as -1. If it is positive, these are all positives, it will show 1. So now let's see. Say okay. Sine. Yeah, so now you can see here all are +1s and these are -1s. So you can also use this particular sine function to color these bars. So let's say if I use this sign in the color marks card, okay, I can mention or I can represent positive values in one color and negative values in a different color. So it helps me differentiate positive and negative values. So for each and every function, so there will be a use case. So you can use it depending on your requirement. So you can use it in any calculations as well. So there will be, while writing any particular length of calculation, so you can use that. So let's say if you want to specify if sine of sum of profit is equal to -1, then you can specify negative or loss, else if. So you can write some calculation based on this. So else if it is +1, then profit. End. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Is it visible now? Okay, so if sine of sum of profit is -1, so I'm just mentioning this as loss. So negative profit is anyways loss. And I am writing one more condition. So if you want to write one more condition, you can specify else if, and if it is equal to 1, then you can mention it as profit. So what can we do with this function calculation? So you can use this calculation to mention like this. So you can see what are the subcategories which is giving loss and what are the subcategories which is giving profit. So all this can be shown. So, I mean, you can use these functions to write some calculations. So there will be a use case for each and every function. So now let's move on to the other functions. So square root, square, these two functions will let us know about the, let's say if you want to find out square root of 25, so it will show you the square root of 25. So these are basically to write some lengthy calculations to create KPIs. So let me show you how to create that. So let's create square root function. So here you can write any name. So this is a calculation name. So write the names properly to understand what is the calculation that you are gonna put in this particular calculation field. So I'm gonna specify square root of 25. Say okay. So if I specify that, so if I double click on this, so I should be able to see the value of square root of 25. And if I mention 125, so you can see the exact values and all. 625. Yeah. So like this, you can find out square root of 625, and you can use this this particular function in lengthy calculations, like we have seen for sine function. And now let's see for square. Square of 45, let's say apply. So you can see what is the square of 45. So 45 square you can see. If you mention 5, so 5 square value is 25. So you can see that value. So it's like a mathematical in calculator, whatever value you can see. So it is the same thing that you are able to see it here. So 5 square. So likewise, whatever you can do in calculator, you can also use that particular calculations here. Let's say square of 5, you want to multiply it with sum of sales. Okay, in some cases, you will do all those things. So double click on this. Yeah, so the value will get multiplied with square of 5. So whatever value 23,26,513 in dollars were there. So the whole total, it is getting multiplied with 25. So instead of writing 25, or if you don't know any particular square of, let's say 25 or some value like this. So instead of doing that, instead of finding the value of square of 2565, so you can directly just do this thing and you can multiply that. So for that reason, you can use these square functions. And there are few functions. So there are few important functions to handle nulls in data. So there are three main functions. One is Zn function and if null and is null. So for that, I'll create an Excel file. I'll create a new Excel file with some empty data. So let's say employee, and I also have salary. Raju, Vijay, Ramu, Sham. Okay, so these are the names that I have. So 50, so I'll enter some salary like this. Okay, so for Renu, I will not enter any value. So now let's see how we can handle that. And so this is for measures. So there will be certain standards to how to handle the nulls in measures and how to handle the nulls in dimensions. So now let me keep city name. So city name of Raju is Hyderabad, Bangalore. So for Ramu, we don't have any details. So for Renu, it is Chennai. Okay, so now let me show you how to handle nulls in measures and how to handle nulls in dimensions. So I'm saving this file. So I'm going back to this. So I'll connect to Excel. Click on this to handle nulls. Okay, so this is the data that I can see. So if you can observe, so for Renu, there is no salary entered here. And for city name, for Ramu, there is no entry that is made. So now let's go to our worksheet. and let's say salary, employee, and the salary. So here you can see a salary, and so for Redu there is no salary been assigned. Like, so maybe she's joined as an intern, or maybe she joined as an new resource, so they might not be assigned any salary. So maybe after 3 months they are going to assign. So let's say I want to add some amount of freeware, like if I want to add some amount, so I want to add 1,000 rupees to each person as a bonus. So I'm just adding bonus amount. So okay, and I will double click on this. Okay, so if you see bonus, I have got 1,000 rupees. So 52,000 is the actual value. So when I add 1,000 rupees to each person, for every person you can see 1,000 rupees increment. But for Renu, there is no amount. So even if I try to add some amount, 1,000 rupees, which is a bonus. So every new employee should also have that bonus. But because of this value is null, so I'm not able to add anything. So you can't add anything. You can't. So mathematically, you can't use any null values to in mathematical calculations. So for that, what I will do is I'll make this as so I will make nulls as zeros. So I have to make nulls as zeros. Why? Because I cannot use nulls for mathematical calculation. Nulls for mathematical calculation. So for that reason, what I need to do is, if there are any nulls, you have to convert into zeros. So if you want to use it for mathematical calculations. So now what I will do is, I'll create a Zn function. So Zn of salary. So Zn of sum of salary. So what this function does is, so it will convert nulls to zeros. So the use of this function is, it will convert nulls to zeros. So now let's see how this will convert. So I'm just writing Zn of sum of salary and say okay. So and I'll use this calculation. So I'll double click on this. So you can see this is my actual salary with null in it. So it has converted null to 0. So now let's use in the bonus calculation. So in the bonus calculation, instead of sum of salary, I'll use this Zn of salary. So you can just drag and drop it here. So you can drag and drop, say apply. Okay, so now you can see that 1,000 is getting added. So earlier you cannot add null to if you add 1 lakh or 1 million value to that. So for null, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it will not consider the values, anything that you add to the nulls or anything that you multiply with. So it will not consider any mathematical calculation. So unless you convert it to 0, then only you can start using for mathematical purposes. So now I have used Zn of salary. So as I have added 1,000 rupees for each person, so for Renu also 1,000 rupees got added. So that is the use of Zn. And now let's talk about if null. If null of sum of salary, comma. So here you can specify. So here you can specify instead of 0, or if it is null, so you can specify any type of value. So Zn is the one where you can specify, or it will automatically convert null to zeros. So you can't specify any number. But in if null, if it is null, you can specify any number that you want. So let's say if the value is null, I want to put some 50,000. Okay, wherever it is null, I want to specify as 50,000. So here it is null. So it will be replaced with 50,000. So now let's take if null and put next to salary. Okay, so null is getting replaced with 50,000. Or let's say you want to replace only with 1,000. Say apply 1,000. So that is getting replaced. So by using if null, you can specify what to replace with. Null can be replaced with the number that we specify. Here you can use 0 also. So which will work like a Zn function. So it will be working like a Zn function. So in Zn also you are able to do 0, and if null also you are able to do 0. But if null has a more capability. So not only making it a 0, you can also make a null to any number as well. Okay, so now let's see what is null. So let's talk about is null. So in the name itself, it is mentioned that is null, whether it is null or not. So to identify whether my data has any nulls or not. So now I'll write sum of salary. So it will just identify if it is null, then only it is true. Otherwise, it will be false. So I'll just double click on this. Okay, so if you see Renu, only for Renu it is true. Why? Because it is null. So whether it will find out if it is null, then it will give you true. And if it is not null, it will be false. So what is the use of identifying like this? So you can use to write some calculations like if is null is equal to true, then you can specify any number or else sum of sum of salary. So like this, you here also you can specify any particular things. So let's say apply. Yeah. So null is replaced with 25, or you can specify 205. So you can mention like that. So here also you can write some particular conditions. And we also have, let's say, city. We have also taken city into consideration. So in city also we have null. So now let's take city. So is null of city name is equal to true. Then if it is null, I want to specify something else like others. They apply. So I'm able to replace null with others. So I can do that. And there, by using if null also we can do the same similar type of dimensions. So you can handle the nulls in dimensions and measure. So let's use if null of city name. Yeah, so you can specify if it is null, you can mention city entry missing. Like this you can mention and use this if null. Yeah, city entry missing. So like this, you can handle the nulls. So these are the three main functions. These are the three main functions to handle the nulls. So this is to let us know whether there are any nulls in the data. So that is about these three functions. So these three functions mainly used to identify and to handle the nulls in the data. So to use, so when there are nulls, you cannot do any mathematical calculations. So if you convert into zero or to any number, then only you can start using this as a calculation in mathematical calculations. So that is about these functions. And ASCII value is the value which will be like computer generated value. So for every letter, there will be a ASCII value assigned to it. So to find out the ASCII value, so let's say if you want to know ASCII of a letter, apply. So it will show you the ASCII value as, so it is actually repeating. So let me just do average. Yeah. So the actual value is A. A has an ASCII value of 65. And for B, it is 66. Yeah. So like that, if you want to find out what is the ASCII value of each and every letter, so this won't be used in our calculations or anything. So it is just for the information I'm just telling. So for every letter, there will be an ASCII value. Yeah, so with that, we have completed most of the number calculations. So now we are going to discuss about the string functions. So here you can see the list of number functions. So with that, we have covered most of the functions. So we have covered the null, how to handle the null values, and rest of them are like normal tan, square root, all are trigonometrical values. So you can just write it and you can find out the values for that. Apart from that, these Zn, if null, is null are the functions are mostly used. So now let's discuss about string functions. So ASCII is the value, to know the value of the letters. Char is the opposite of that. So if you know the number, and you can find out the name of or letter of that particular number. So now let's start discussing about string functions. So let's go to Superstore. So let's take customer name. So in customer name, we have different names. So 800 different names are there. So with this, I will show you how to handle or how to write calculation for strings. So these are the strings basically. So all the names, all the dimensions, most of the dimensions are strings. So how to use string functions for these particular things, we will be able to know. So in dimensions, we have most of the columns we use as strings, or most of the columns are strings. And you can see, so for date, we have separate functions. For date, if you see, apart from date, you can write string functions for all the dimensions. For only for date function, we have separate list of calculations or list of functions. So in string functions, apart from date dimension, so all the dimensions will be considered as string functions. Okay, so now let's start with string functions. So ASCII and char is just the values that will be shown for each and every character. So now let's see for contains. So contains, so you have to specify the column name, so customer name. In that, I want to see whichever customer name contains, let's say Hawk. Okay, in their name, if it contains, then only it will be true. So when this condition satisfies, if the customer name contains Hawk, then the condition will be satisfied and it will show true. So this will be like a Boolean function. So I'll write the name as contains. So say okay and use this contains. So you can see it is a Boolean function. So whenever that condition satisfies, it will show you true. If it is not satisfying, it will show as false. Yeah, so there is only one name which has hawk. So it is getting satisfied. And I also want to know, let's say VICT. So whichever name contains VICT. So these are the four names which contains VICT. So why do we do this particular exercise? So we'll just to know how to use these string functions, and sometimes we want to understand. Uh, let's say if I take an example of starts with. So there is a function called starts with. I want to see whose name starts with A. So the number of persons whose name starts with A. So these many people are there whose name is starting with A. Okay, so I can write condition like this. So not only you can write function, you can also write if-else statement. So for every function, you can use if-else statements. So if starts with is true, if starts with A is true, then you can name it as starts with A. So this way you can do high level categorization. So else if I want to write one more condition. So next one I want to start with B. So else if like this you can write n number of calculations. You can extend the lines. Whichever name starts with C, C, else others. Say okay. So here it has done the grouping. So these are the names which are starting with A, and these are the names which are starting with B. So if you take the count, go here and click on count distinct and make it as discrete. Okay, so there are 64 names which are starting with A, and there are 57 names which are starting with B. So likewise, you can find out the list of or the number of items or the number of customers whose names are starting with. So likewise, if you want to do a grouping or if you want to make some higher level categorization for each and every customer. So if there are 800 customers. So you have given a scenario where you need to group the people. So this is how you can group the people. And not only starts with, you can also specify ends with. So ends with, if the names are ending with letter A, or if the names are ending with letters C or B, say apply. So let me take customer name. Okay, so there are four people. So you can see, let's say Craig Edwab. So his name is ending with B letter. So Edwab B. So his name is ending with B letter. So that is why, I mean, you can identify those type of calculations. So let me, so I have written it as starts with B. So I will modify the calculation that I have written. Okay, so I can, here I can specify ends with A, ends with B, ends with C. So like this, I can specify. Okay, so ends with A. So if you see, all the names are ending with A letter. So this way, like this, you can do the grouping. So now let's talk about some other functions. So we have completed contains and ends and find. So if you want to find a letter in the name, so if you want to find a letter, so when I say find, so it will show you the location of that particular letter. Let's say I want to find out the K position. So MICK. So K position is the fourth position. So find customer name. In the customer name, find the letter K. Say apply. So if you see Alan Huang, so there is no letter called K in it. Yeah. So if you see Bradley Drucker, so what is the position of K here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Spaces also will be considered. 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 is a K position. So to find out the letter position, you can use this. So what is the use of this? So let me just show you. So let's say if I have combined, so let me create an email ID. So if you remember, we have created a email ID earlier. So let me split this name. So how do I split this? Click on transform and click on split. So it will split. I will do what I will do is I will do last name dot first name. So last name is the second piece. So just take in plus last name dot first name plus you can specify @org.com. So this will become your email ID. Say okay. So here you can see bergman.aaron@org.com. So now I want to find out the location of org.com. So I'll write a find calculation for email ID, and I want to know the location or org.com. Say apply. So use this find, double click on this, and 1 second. So let's make it as dimension, remove email ID. Yeah, sorry. Remove this find. Okay, so now you can see where exactly the org.com is. So it is at 14th position. So it is starting at 14th position. So with this, I'm able to know, so what is the length of the customer name. So it has like 13 letters and the 14th position is this one. So like this, you can find out the length of the customer name. And you can also directly use one more calculation to find out what exactly the length of the customer name. Length meaning the number of letters in the customer name. So length of, so there is a function called len, length of customer name. Say okay. Yeah, so here there is length. So then convert this into dimension. Okay, so you can see here, so this is the length of the customer name. So when I say length, how many letters are there? So if you take Adam Hurt, so Adam 4, Hurt is 4, and there is a space in between these two names, so that is 1. So 4 plus 4 plus 1 is 9. So you can find out the length of the characters in a particular name. So depending on your requirement, so these are the abilities of that particular function. So there might be, so you might be getting some requirements. So while you can use this. So let's say I have got a requirement to create a email ID. So you will get in your real time. So you'll be able to get some requirements to use these functions. So length, or to find out any particular letter in the, so let's say I want to find out where exactly this org.com is there. So you'll get some certain requirements like that. So let me just ask you a few questions. So before I move on to the other functions. So Bhaskar Reddy, can you tell me what does contains function does? What does it do? Yeah, so if it will identify the letters which are there in the names. Yeah, yeah, it is a Boolean function. Perfect. So it will give true or false. If the condition satisfies, it will give you true. Otherwise, it will give you false. Perfect. Thank you. Nazrin, can you tell me about starts with? Yeah, yeah, correct. So letters with which the customer name or string starts with. So we can specify some letters. Okay. Yeah, Prashant, can you tell me about ZN function? Okay. Rajesh, can you tell me about ZN function? Yeah, perfect. So it will convert, no, 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 it's null to zeros. It will convert. So if you have nulls in data, it will convert into zeros. Okay. Rakib, can you tell me about if null function? Null to? Yeah, it will replace with not only zero, you can replace with any number. It, it can be a zero also. Okay. Roja, can you tell me about is null? Okay. Vishnu, can you tell me about is null? Yeah, to check whether it is null or not. Yes. Whether it is null or not. So this is also a Boolean function. The condition satisfies, then it will be true. Otherwise, it will be false. Okay. So Vishwajit, can you tell me about ends with function? Okay, no problem, Vishnu. Yeah. Okay, so ends with basically to find out the letters that are ending with. So if let's say customer name is Adam Hawk. Okay, so I want to find out the letter it is ending with K. So that this customer will be considered. And if I mention is A, so this customer will not be considered. So in 800 customers, so if you want to find out what are the customer names which are ending with A or K, like that, if you want to make some higher level categorization, you can use these functions. So now let's move on to the other functions. Yeah, so we have completed contains, ends with, and find. So find nth. So there is one more function called find nth. So find nth is nothing but, so earlier when I say find, so if you see the find calculation, so when I mentioned @org.com, so it is finding. So if you specifically mention, any particular letter, let's say A. So if you see the letter A is repeated multiple times in Aaron Bergman. So by default, when you use a find function, so it will just find out the first letter position. But you can, by using find nth, so let's start from find calculation, then I will tell you about find nth. So find is nothing but find in customer name. Let's find letter A. So you cannot write a similar name to different calculations. So you should change the name. Let's say find the calculation is already there. When I try to rename, so if I use the same name, so it will give me an error saying, so this name is already exists. You should use a different name. If I can use dot also, so that becomes a different name. But instead of that, I'm using new find. So say apply, and new find, I'll convert into dimension and put it next to the customer name. Okay, so letter A, so these letters are starting with A letter. So that is why it is showing the position as 1. So there are some names which are okay. Bradley, so this position is at third position. So it is showing you the third. And for Brenda, the A letter is at sixth position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it is at sixth position. But there are some times, so the A letter is multiple times repeated. So I want to find out the second letter A position or third position. So you can specify the second or third or which letter that you want to find out. So customer name. So here you can see the example. So first you can mention the letter, and next how many second A you want or third A you want, you can specify that. After this, I will specify, I want to find out third A and say apply. So if you see, there are two A's in the starting, so it is not considering the position of those two A's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So A is at 12th position. I told Tableau that to consider the third letter A, to not to consider the first two letters of A. So that is giving you this thing. And if you see Adam Schillingsberg, so there are only two A's and there is no third A at all. So that is why it is showing you 0 position. So there is no third A at all. And let's say if I mention second A and say apply, so it will give you the second A position. So in Aaron, second A is at second position. In Adam, it is at third position. So first letter, second letter, and third position. So this is how you can find out the location of the each letters. Yeah, so that is about find nth. So now let's go back to our string functions and is date. So let's create a date function. So let's create a date, and date has to be in a proper date format. Let's say like this, it has to be 13/5/2023. So sometimes what happens is you might not be able to see the proper date. So let's say if I enter some 45, which is not a proper date. Okay, so now let's connect to this. So I will refresh the data in Tableau. We'll go here. refresh it. Yeah, I can see a date column here. Okay, so I have date here. So whether I want to find out whether these are in date format or not. So I will write a calculation. So there is a function to know whether it is a date or not. This date. Say okay. So only this is the one which is in the proper date format. So in Excel it is MMDDYY. So 13 is also not getting considered. So let me change it to 11. So and save it and refresh this. Okay, so now this is also true. Okay, so these two are in date format and this is not in date format. So MMDD cannot be 45 value. So as we have dates only till days only till 31 and months only till 12. So it has to follow the standards. Then only it will be considered as a date. So to find out in your entire data, let's say you have 1,000 records or million records. In the entire records, if you want to find out whether it is a date or not, so there is a function called isDate. So by using isDate, you can find out whether it is in proper date format or not. So I have just written isDate and took that string value and whether it is in proper date format or not. So not only that, so I can just write, so if isDate equal to true, then you can say is date, else null. So you can remove those unnecessary dates, so which is not in proper date format. You can just make it as null. So by using this calculation, so I can just make the unnecessary data as null. So this we can't use that particular date. So there is an option that we can use. So if you see, so normally when you convert, when you have date in date format, you will be getting a date symbol, but you are getting an ABC symbol here. So this is not in proper date format. Okay, so here also you are able to see ABC, but here we have to see a calendar symbol. As all the values are not in proper date format, Tableau is not directly taking as a date. So we have to manually convert into date. So click on ABC and click on date. Okay, now you can use this as a date. Okay, so now, so date in date format will have lot of capabilities. So we are going to discuss about date column separately. So it will have lot of options. So normal string will not have so many options, but date will have lot of options. So we will discuss about date in separate session, and date in filters also will have lot of capabilities. So date functions are separate, date calculations are separate. So date has a separate set of functions, set of rules that are there. So if you have date in date format, then you will have lot of capabilities. So you have to try to convert into date format. If you get it like this, you have to try to convert date into date format so that you can use it for multiple purposes. So if it looks like a string, you cannot use it for multiple purposes. Let's say if I take this normal date, so it is not separating any year or month, week, quarter that I can do here. So this is coming like a string. But when you take the date that I have converted into, so this is I have converted into date. So the dates that I entered, it is only for 2023. So you can see like that. Discrete. Yeah. So this way you can separately see month wise separately, year wise separately, day wise separately. So you can see that. So that is the use of date. So we are going to discuss about that in upcoming sessions. So now let's go back to our topic. So we were discussing about string functions. So in string functions only isDate function is available. So isDate function is to will let us know whether the date is in date format or not. So to identify that, we use isDate function. And now let's see some other functions. Contains, sorry, take customer name. I'm taking customer name because customer name has some 800 values. Or let me take subcategory so that it is easily understandable. So subcategory has only 17 subcategories. And we also have some other functions like left. So there are functions like left, right, and mid. So these are the functions. Let's say if you want to specifically want left side few letters, or if you want specifically want some right side few letters, or middle some letters you want, you can specify that. Or let's say if you take the email ID calculation that I have written, so let's take email ID. So let's say in your data, you're getting some email IDs. So you want to separate this org.com. So how will you separate? By using right function. So you want right side letters. The right side, what you want, this org.com is written. So how many letters are there? So org.com is com is 3, org is 3, 3 plus 3 6, dot 1, and at the rate is 1. So 6 plus 2, it is 8 letters. So right side 8 letters I want from the email ID. So mention that email ID and mention how many letters that you want. From right side, I want these 8 letters. So this will become my right calculation. Right. So this will give me that at the rate org.com separately. So likewise, if you have something to your left side, so you can create left function, left email ID. I want starting 5 letters, let's say. So I can see the starting 5 letters. So this is what I can see. So starting 5 letters if you want to get it. And now let's see mid function. So left is the one where you can get the left side letters and you can specify the number of letters that you want. And right is the one you can get the right side letters and you can specify, let's say you want 3 letters, you will get this .com. Com you will get. So that's how you, let's say, let me write one for right only. Let's say if I mention 3 letters only. So I'll get only COM. Okay, so I can get that value. COM is coming. So the last 3 letters are COM only. And left side, you can get the left side starting letters. And now let's see how mid works. Mid of email ID. Okay, you can specify some mid letters. So starting from letter 4, I want 3 letters. So starting, let's say, let me take an example of this one. Abelman. So starting from 4th letter. So starting from 4th letter is L. I want 3 letters from there. LMA. So you will get LMA for these 3 names. So let's see how that works. So mid. Yeah. So if you see starting from 4th letter LMA. So you can see 3 letters. So middle some values if you want to get it specifically. So you can use a mid function. Yeah, so that is about some of the functions. So these are the functions that can be used in while writing the calculations. So with that, we'll end this session for today. So we'll continue with some other functions. So any questions on today's session? Okay. Okay, then thank you all for joining. We'll continue tomorrow. And please try to publish in the Tableau public and share the link in the group. So I will also publish this dashboard which I have prepared today, and I'll share the link in the group. So try to replicate whatever dashboard that I'm preparing in the sessions. So try to replicate those things and publish in the Tableau public and share the link in the group. Yeah, okay. Thank you.